What we've got is what was a 4x4 of mahogany. And it's been sliced 3 ways like this into 3 separate pieces. This piece used to be right here. So you take a 4x4, you chop off this short piece, you split 3 pieces this way. This is going to be 3 heels for guitars. So it's the same contiguous piece of wood from this, and it's going to move right back up onto here so that the grain, the nap, the color, the staining all matches. We're going to make a special cut here and get the bend of the neck in. I'm going to show you how that's done. The operation that we're going to look at here is where we take the neck and we add the angle to it. This is a real complex glue joint. It's a scarf joint that actually has a wave in it so that it turns out really beautiful at the end. The parts are cut like this. This is that neck that used to be sitting like this. It's been cut apart. These 2 curves have been cut into it, and it's going to fit on top of each other like that. They work in a team to keep the glue going. Everything fits into the carousel and is locked in place. They're going to use a little impact wrench to come down, torque every glue joint so it has the exact right amount of pressure. We run everything through around the carousel, and you can keep going if you want in circles because the glue dries in the same amount of time. Each one of these machines are designed so that you can just work on them without stopping. We use 2 types of joints on their necks. On some guitars we use what we call a finger joint. Other guitars we use a scarf joint. The scarf joint yields a real nice little sort of a ducktail when we carve it, and we'll look at that detail a little bit later. The next operation has just been done to this neck where there's some side cutting done, a little bit of cutting up here, but you'll notice that again it's still 3 necks. 3 necks together, and now that one block has been cut into 3 pieces. There's been a piece of aluminum added to it. It's been threaded from this side. This is eventually going to go right here on the guitar. It's going to fit like this, and that'll end up being the heel of the guitar. That gets added at almost the very last step. The tricky part about all of this is every one of these have a serial number, and they've got to move along with it. So we start with lumber, we cut these pieces, they separate and go their separate ways to get work done, and they eventually have to come back together and stay together. For that reason, we make exactly what we need every day. We don't really work ahead, and there's just less parts to keep track of that way, because this heel's got to end up on this neck, same as it was in the log, so that we have a nice beautiful neck at the end. Now this neck has had the back of the peg head sized, the actual exact right dimension cut on the face so the angle's right. The truss rod's been installed. It's just a metal rod that runs through here. It anchors down here on the end. There's a couple of steel pins to keep it from pulling up. And then there's been a filler put over the top of it. Now the next step is we're going to come into the machine here, trim the filler strip down, and put a couple of index holes in it. We also see that there's a little, we call this a T-nut. It's a nut that's been installed in here. This is going to get buried with a fretboard, and eventually it'll be exposed on the back side. That's the third to add to these 2 on the heel that hold the neck in place when we finish the neck up. Almost all the machining on a neck is done with a computerized mill. Makes everything accurate, every part's interchangeable, any neck can fit on any body. We're making fingerboards here, made out of ebony. This board has been milled to an exact thickness. There's been 3 index holes put in. These are tooling holes, and we're going to be able to line a lot of stuff up whilst we do all the work. That's going to register where our slots are. It's also going to be what we use to pin it to the mahogany when we glue it onto the neck. Eventually, the index holes that we have on the back side of the neck are going to get buried by gluing the neck onto the body. So before we do anything else, we have to create some registration points on the face of the neck. These are really small holes, and they're narrower than the frets are. So eventually, when we're done using them, we'll hammer frets in right over these holes, and they'll disappear. But they give us a fantastic registration all the way up till that point. This next step, we're actually planing with a fly cutter the ebony to an exact thickness. The thickness that it goes into it is something that's done on big woodworking machines. It's not necessarily super accurate. This one is going to get to the fingerboard right to the thousandth of an inch of the thickness that we want to work with. Now it's time to cut the fret slots themselves. The first pass is going to cut the fretboard off to the length, get rid of all that waste material. The next pass cuts the fret slots themselves. Now that isn't a straight path, it's actually traveling in an arc. Every time it runs over a fretboard, it's moving up and down in the same arch that the surface of the fretboard is radius to, which is 15 inches on a Taylor guitar. So now we have the fretboards. They've been cut to width. We've got index holes in the back, accurate index holes in the front, fret slots in them. Now they're ready for their inlay patterns. Some have dots. We have different sizes of dots, and we have all kinds of different inlay patterns. This one is going to get what we call progressive diamond. We used to use it on our 800 series, and now it's going on the solid body custom. We'll watch that run. 3 cutters at a time will run. They're high-speed routers. They run at about 70,000 RPM. This type of machining is so accurate because we actually use a similar machine to make the pearl. It's so accurate that we actually have to program the amount of gap that we want between the pearl and the wood. For example, if we get the gap too small, there's not even any room for glue. So we make a program, we know what size the pearl is, and then we leave about 5/1000 of an inch, which is a little thicker than a piece of paper all the way around it. That allows the black super glue that we use to pour in, glue the inlay in place, and put a little tiny bit of filler around it. Behind me is a machine that's doing the same thing that we were just doing on the fretboard, except for it's doing it on a peghead veneer. So we have a piece of ebony here. You can see the different inlays that we've put in them. We've cut a slot for the Taylor logo. We've cut holes in here for indexing later on in the process. We've cut the truss rod opening and the screw holes. We've scored it where it needs to get cut off. And we've actually cut the line here that's going to receive the binding that goes around the peg head. So now we've brought the fretboards over and we've added the binding to the edge. Some binding is cream, some's white, some binding is black. Some guitars don't even have binding. A lot of different models. The binding's been put on, and those inlays have been put in. Here we just happen to have dots on the guitars we're doing right now. The binding's on, everything is sanded flat. We've got the index holes. Beyond that, we have the neck blank with its index holes ready to accept it. Looks something like this. Peghead veneer's been put on. The registration is ultra accurate because we take such care with getting the registration marks on. Every neck goes individually into a clamping cell. The clamping cell has a precision milled steel plug underneath it that has the shape of the neck. There's actually a forward bow in it. There's a little drop off on the tail of the fretboard. It's not a straight, flat thing. It's a complex shape. You know, I often say we have a PhD in necks. You know, Taylor is, I started out just sort of accidentally, not even knowing what I'm doing, making thin guitar necks, because the first ones I carved, it's like, well, that's too big, and kept going, that's too big, and kept taking wood off, oh, that's just right, and some people came up and said, oh, that's too thin, it's going to warp, but it didn't warp. Imagine that. And so we started making necks that were playable, and I really, really focused on that. We had a good tone for our guitars, and I thought, wow, you know, nice playing guitars is a measurable, kind of objective thing, you know. You might get 20 people in a room and some go, oh, I love Taylor's, they're the greatest sounding guitars, and someone else go, it's not my cup of tea, but all 20 of them will go, they play good, you know. Everyone will say, yeah, we admit they play good, or we're happy to admit it, or we love it, you know. The thing about building necks, especially trying to get a straight neck, is it's not just a straight piece of wood with a straight ebony fretboard on it. There's a lot of complexities to it and a lot of really fine nuances, so that at the very, very end, when you look down a neck, you get, it needs to be straight all the way up to about the 16th fret, then it should fall away just a tiny bit. When you adjust the truss rod, you don't want to end up with a hump at the 14th fret. You want this relief to happen, curves to happen in the right place. Those are things that you just learn over years and years of making guitars. And then you build sophisticated tooling to get that on every neck. Once the fretboards are on, then it's time to start doing a series of stress relieving, and then we're ready to come in here, straighten the neck, put the arc in the fingerboard, this 15-inch radius, and put the frets in and do all the trimming here. This fretboard's a little bit bigger than what it's going to end up being. The binding's thick, and we're going to trim everything down. Well, here we are, the next step. The fretboard has been glued on like we saw earlier. We basically have a neck that almost looks like an electric guitar neck because we haven't glued the heel on it. You see all the index holes that are ready to accept new fixtures or the heel. What we want to do is we want to round this fretboard. This whole process is going to take the guitar neck from this. You see this is rough up here. There's not a nut. There's glue coming down the side. This is a flat fretboard. There's no frets in it. What we're going to do is take it through the process all the way to this step here. Now we've got everything trimmed to its exact size. We're going to run a sanding device over it, runs back and forth, and sands not only in a straight line this way, but at the same time adds the arc to the fretboard. Then we're going to come in with routers and trim this to a size. We're going to cut a slot across here to put the nut in. We're going to take this neck off, and we're going to put it into a fixture where we press the frets in. So now we've got the frets on the neck, we've added the heel, simple glue joint, and now we're going to the complex carving to get the final shape. We can see that this little, you get a close-up here, you can see how this joint is beginning to take shape. It's got a nice little teardrop shape that runs right down the back of the peg head. When you can see it, it looks beautiful. When it's invisible, you can't even see it. So basically, it's a nice little detail. Sometimes the light will highlight on it. So here you've got the final shape. Since we're CNC carving, everything is a master, one right after the other. You've just got digital reproduction here. You can see the complexity of this starting to take shape. And this T-nut has now opened up. And in the background, the machine is just working away at a real high resolution, making passes back and forth. Does a fantastic job of carving the necks. So now this neck has been taken all the way to the end. It's ready for a little final sanding. Heel is on, joint's done, everything's fretted, and that final Taylor peghead shape's been put on. A lot of people come to Taylor and they comment on our machinery, on our technology. It's, you know, it used to mean more to me, the whole machinery aspect, probably because I was a pioneer in harnessing the power of modern machinery to do this. Again, you go around to modern factories now and you see more and more of this. It's inevitable because the machinery that's available today is just so slick. But years ago we set up a tooling department. I mean, I was it at one time, and then I got some help, and now we've got a fantastic machinery and tool department. Other factories have the same thing. Ours is a little different. We have our own axe to grind. We have our own ideas on how the way things should be done. And we've got a fantastic team. And by having all of that in-house, our ability to conceive methods of building guitars or conceive the machinery that needs to be developed to do that, the fact that we have a really extremely high ability in that regard. We don't really have to use outside consultants or outside machinery designers. Again, we're very vertically integrated. And so the people that are working on our machines are living and breathing with us. Often when you design a machine or a process, the real idea doesn't come until it's 3/4 of the way completed. And you might have to rewind all the way back to almost the beginning. I imagine musicians can relate to this. They might be working on a song and arranging it, and they work on it, and then one day they're like, that's not right. And they scrap the whole thing and start over. But it was that work that they did that led them to the point where they knew exactly how they wanted to do that song. It's the same with machinery. If we were using outside vendors to design our processes, they would have no idea. Sure, there's clever people out there, but unless they live in the guitar factory, they're not clever enough. And so we bring the people here, they work for us, we build that stuff here, and it's pretty neat. And you know, it's funny because years ago the technology seemed so futuristic, and nowadays it seems so common. But you'll never get, there's still never anything more fun than watching a CNC carve a neck or watching a robotic arm electrostatically put finish on a guitar with no waste, with no pollution, with nothing going up the smokestack, so a lot of what we're working for environmental reasons, and we're working for how good the guitar can be, the quality of the guitar, all of that together. And it's just become kind of a common, portion of our life every day is working with the tools to make guitars.